I'd like to thank Ms. Rod and Dr. Spradley for inviting me to talk to you. What I'd like to do is to talk to you today about some possible job opportunities you may consider. Even if you want to be a teacher, even if you want to work with children in another capacity, a lot of times people are looking for work before they maybe go to their major career goal or before they pursue that. And I'd like to talk to you about pursuing a job working in research. A lot of times when people think about working with children, they may not be aware of the fact, but that there are a lot of research opportunities. And that's what I'd like to begin to talk to you about today, give you an idea where to look and what you'd be doing on these jobs. In fact, I've known a couple of people who liked it so much they stayed in research for their entire career. So I'll begin by giving you a little bit of background of myself and some of the students I've worked with through the years and some of the qualifications that they've had and what they got out of it and what was expected. First of all, I'm a developmental psychologist. I work with children, I've done research with children, and I teach here at Queensborough. I've been doing research probably about 25 years now. And along the way, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of undergraduate students and graduate students. The research that I've been involved in primarily deals with children under 3 years of age, but I've also been involved on some projects that work with children who are 11 or 13 years of age. For the most part, I think the students that we've involved in the research, whether it's volunteer or most of the time on a paid basis, I think have enjoyed the work and they've learned a lot about working with children. Most of the students that I've worked with were training to be psychologists or had career interest in being psychologists, but that by no means was all of the individuals. I've worked with people who wanted to be a clinical psychologist and a couple people who were teachers when they finished up their work as researchers. So there's a wide variety of people that get themselves involved in research. I think I'd like to put a plug in for research too, because it's a different context than what you see in the classroom. Typically in research we deal one-on-one with children. You're not dealing with a group of children, but one. Certainly the time frame is different. You're not going to see the child across, for an entire year. But you're going to be working pretty intensively with the child, maybe for a day, maybe for 2 days, maybe for an hour or two. It all depends what the nature of the study is like. So let me begin. Let me also say too, if you have any questions along the way, please ask them. You don't have to wait till the very end. I don't mind if this is a bit interactive. I think a lot of times when you mention research, it's not always clear what research is. So the first thing I'd like to do is maybe give it a definition. Research is really working on a project that's designed to answer questions through data collection. When you get yourself involved in a research project, you can rest assured you're going to work probably with about 5 to 10 people. Their people will range in terms of their abilities, their education levels, but your primary task, your goal, is going to be focused around getting research participants, having them come through the study, and collecting all types of data on children and even on parents and families. And your focus then is really making sure that the quality of data that you get and the way you collect it is nice and uniformly done. That's, I think, a nice summary of what research is all about. A lot of times people ask too, what is the typical lab like, or where is a lab located? You know, your typical lab is usually associated with a college, a university, or a hospital. I can tell you across the New York area here, there are lots of laboratories that deal with children. You know, you look in Queens College, they work with children in a laboratory. You look at NYU, they have a laboratory that deal with children. They have several, in fact. Or I've done research at Albert Einstein in the Bronx. They have a lot of labs that work with children and do research with children. All throughout the 5 boroughs, you may not be aware of it, but there's a lot of research going on with children. About 5 to 10 people in each lab, undergraduate students, graduate students, professors, medical doctors, and computer technicians all work together. What do laboratories research? I think it's another good question. You'll look and you'll see that laboratories will research a variety of questions. It really depends upon what people are interested in. You know, a lot of laboratories will look at physical development, how children change through time in terms of their physical attributes. Others will look at cognitive development, social development. The nice thing about living in New York, you have a lot of laboratories that you can choose from. And if you're interested in a particular area of the way children change, the way they grow, or perhaps how you want to work with families, you can pretty much find a lab that's doing research in that area. A lot of times people will ask too, what are researchers like? Well, researchers tend to be detail-oriented. Some may even say they get fixated on details. But when you're collecting data, when that's your main job, you want to make sure that the data is collected in a nice, uniform way, child after child, parent after parent. And so you strive to do it in the same way and to have the people that work with you do so in the same way. So if you're a detail-oriented person or you have tendencies in that direction, I think it's a great option. The staff at a lot of places too, not only is there a diversity in terms of educational level, there's a diversity in terms of background. And I think it makes for a nice experience to have a mix of people. Certainly, you look at a lot of studies. I was working on one project a number of years ago, and they were looking at, I forget even the issue, it was in regard to language and toxic exposure to various substances. And they were interested in different groups in the city. So you had people from Asian backgrounds, you had people from Caucasian backgrounds, you had people from Hispanic, you have all different backgrounds of people. So the thing to keep in mind is you're going to have a nice mix of people. The other thing, how are labs organized? The one thing I think you'll find is that in the New York area, you have lone labs, you have people that operate pretty much in isolation from other laboratories. However, I will tell you there are a lot of centers in the city, and they work on issues and they work in combination with one another. If you look at NYU, for instance, they have a large area that does research with children. All different aspects are investigated. It's a nice place to do work. You look at Columbia, and they too have a large research center. If you look on the Upper West Side, they have the Mailman Center. And they do a lot of research projects, all different types. And certainly you can find pretty much a group or an interest that satisfies you. Once again, the type of people I think you're going to be working with in an average lab, you're going to be working with a primary investigator, that's the researcher who's doing the project. You're going to be working with probably a medical person or two, or nurses. You're going to be working with graduate students. You're going to be working with undergraduate students. And you're going to be working with clerical staff. And depending upon the nature of the project, others too. So it's a wide range of people. Now, how are you going to get into such a place? The first thing you're going to do, probably to get your foot in the door, is you're going to become a research assistant. This is a nice entry-level position. This is how you begin to get your feet wet in research. What are the educational requirements? Now, I put these down, but I put them down somewhat loosely. Generally, they're looking for people with an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, or sometimes just a high school degree with the person working on his or her college degree. So that's a nice advantage. And generally, they will tell you up front in the ad what they're looking for. If you're going to be administering more standardized tests, if you're going to be doing assessments, they probably will put down some educational requirement. But by no means do you have to have a graduate degree. These are designed to be entry-level positions. And keep in mind something. Most labs like to have students involved in the work. And a lot of researchers, too, like to have students involved not only in doing the research, but if they're interested in part of it, if maybe they'd like to pursue a line of the work, to have them actually involved in writing up some of the work and presenting it as part of their education. It all depends on the researcher. The researcher gets to organize the way he or she wants to run the lab. Your job primarily as a research assistant is to take children through a research protocol. And what does that mean? Well, it means that when a parent brings a child to the lab, you're going to take the child through all of the assessments, all of the procedures, all of the questionnaires, and you're going to be working with mom too, or dad. So your job is to facilitate that whole process. I can tell you, most people enjoy it. The work can be difficult at times because you're working with children. Some kids perhaps may not be having a good day. But I think for the most part, students like working with the kids. It's a fairly enjoyable experience. I think some very good pieces of experience that you're going to get if you work in a research lab are the following. The one thing you're going to do is most probably they're going to teach you to administer standardized tests. Now, what are standardized tests? Standardized tests can be looking at the child's verbal ability. Maybe they will teach you to administer an assessment like the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test, we call the PPVT. They may train you to administer some scales of a child's academic achievement, another very common assessment that's given. They may even teach you to give an intelligence test for children. Sometimes I think students get a little bit nervous about doing this. Do they have the qualifications? Are they going to be able to handle it? Always keep something in mind. Most of the researchers I know are not going to let you loose working with children on your own until you're ready. They're going to help you learn. They're going to give you the skills that you need. They're going to stay with you until you learn. And then most of the researchers I know are very eager and anxious to give you points along the way if you're having any type of difficulty. And remember, the way standardized tests are designed, it's to make them fairly easy to administer in a standardized fashion. You'll also be given some training to do questionnaires. Pretty much you're going to be working with the parents. You may ask parents about their background, educational level, temperament, what's the family environment like, anything that we think can maybe contribute to the findings. And then you may be even trained to help out doing some experimental assessments. Most researchers I know that work with children will administer standardized assessments, but in addition, they're also testing things out along the way. They're trying to maybe make an assessment better, to maybe tweak it a little bit, to make it a bit more informative, and so things are always under development. So you'll also be trained to do that. Most of the time today, these are computer-based. And so that you'll be sitting with the child in a laboratory, maybe 10 to 15 minutes. Usually the parent is there with you, and you're taking the child through this computerized battery. You'll be interviewing the parents, and you'll also be interviewing children. I think it's fun to interview the kids. Because when you interview kids, we ask them questions designed by adults, and invariably we make mistakes. We don't ask kids in the right way. And I think it's a lot of fun when the kid looks at you, furrows their brow, and says to you, "Are you trying to ask me this?" "Well, yeah, that's what I'm trying to ask you." And then they rephrase it for you, and literally they tell you the way it should be phrased. And I think it gives you great insight into a child's thought process. So you're going to be interviewing both parents and children. And we start giving questionnaires to kids at about 3 years of age. Simple questions, hopefully things they can understand. And as the kids get older, the number of things we ask increases over time. The other thing you're going to be doing is contacting parents and arranging appointments. I would love to tell you that most of your time is going to be spent working with parents and children. You spend a lot of time doing that, but you're also going to be part of the force that is helping to get the parents to the laboratory. Okay? Unfortunately, in today's day and age, parents are extremely busy. It can be difficult to track them down because people have cell phones and they change their cell phone numbers a lot. And you're always trying to arrange and rearrange. Well, generally in most labs, there are a number of people that do this. So you're calling people on the phone, you're sending them emails, you're tracking them down, and you are hopefully, and then at the end of this, able to arrange an appointment. You know, certainly a couple years ago I was involved in a project where we were bringing children back. We had seen them the last time at 3 years of age and bringing them back when they were 11 years of age. I became very aware of how mobile people are today. About 25 to 30% of our sample have moved out of the New York area. When they moved for various reasons. Housing was too expensive, couldn't get a job, they wanted to go somewhere warmer. And certainly I could give you 12 different reasons. But I can tell you that people that I worked with, and myself included, it was sometimes pretty typical to spend 2 to 3 hours searching for people, sending emails, calling people, different phone numbers, tracking them down. And certainly there was almost elation when we found somebody. And I even had a couple mothers say, "Wow, I didn't think you'd find me," and you did. And certainly that's what a lot of time is devoted to. And it's not that they didn't want to be found, but certainly, when people move, they get busy and they forget to call you, even though they promised to do so. So that'll be something that you'll be doing too. You'll be calling, making phone calls, setting up appointments. In fact, running the kids through the study is almost kind of the end product, and it's the fun part. It's what, it's your reward for all of the work that you did ahead of time. The other thing you'll be doing too, you'll be performing clerical tasks. I'd like to say you won't, but you will. You'll be stuffing envelopes because we send out envelopes to contact parents, reminder notes, even in the year 2012, believe it or not, a paper reminder in the mail does better than sending an email or the phone. In fact, I've had parents tell me, "Wow, I was so surprised to get something in the mail. I hardly get any mail any longer." Snail mail has now become something of the exception, so people notice it. After you go past research assistant, I want to tell you some other jobs that are available. Because generally, you begin as a research assistant. If you like it, though, and certainly you fit into the organization nicely, you may begin to move. They may be asking you to stay on, and they will put you into different positions. The next position is something called a recruiter. Let me tell you the context in which a recruiter works. A recruiter works for several researchers. You typically see this in larger institutions. And you may have 10 different researchers who are working with children, but they want somebody central to recruit kids. That is the job of the recruiter. They keep in contact with parents, they establish and maintain a database, and they call parents, and they set up an appointment. And they work together, kind of a central person with all of the, not only the research assistants, but more with the researchers. I know one person, actually I know two people, both have been doing this for about the last 10 years. They like doing it. They've established, they got a rapport with parents, they know where to contact the parents, and in effect too, what they'll do, sometimes they even go visit parents as soon as they give birth in the hospital. And they'll say, "Would you like to be part of this research study?" They'll explain it, maintain contact, and they get the parents enrolled. The thing that you'll keep in mind, if you are a recruiter, you're not only going to be working getting children for several studies, you're also going to be dealing with several personalities of researchers, if you will. And when it comes to getting subjects for studies, participants, that in a very real way is the most important part of doing research. You can propose all the projects you want, but you have to have data to support your ideas, hopefully. So this person has a very important role to fill and has to try to make sure that he or she is doing their best when it comes to getting people to go through the studies. The other thing you'll probably be doing as a recruiter is you'll also be working with the community. The recruiters I know, they will go out, they go to schools, they go to parenting centers, they go to community organizations, and they try to get parents interested. And certainly it's an important role. They may spend 2 or 3 nights every week doing this, and they establish a good rapport with the community, and they get people enrolled. If you like being a research assistant, if you make it to research recruiter, or perhaps even not, you may become a research coordinator. Generally, for a research coordinator, you have to have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. You may say, why? Excuse me. With a research coordinator, you're going to be working much more intensively with the researchers. Your job will be to supervise research assistants, and not only that, you'll be working with the researchers, telling them how the study is going. Do they have it designed well? Do the children seem to like the tasks? Does something need to be changed? And really, for you to have a good idea of what needs to be done, most researchers will say you need somebody with a bachelor's degree, maybe a master's degree. So you're working much more hands-on with the researchers. You're more in a supervisory capacity. The other thing you're going to be doing, you are the manager of grant-funded research. You're going to be doing purchasing, you're going to be buying equipment, you're maybe taking care of salary, you may be handling the books. Now, let me say something about a lot of the research that's done. It's funded by the National Institute of Health, it's funded by the National Science Foundation, or it's funded by private foundations. I can tell you that a lot of researchers, when they get money for projects, the size of the project may demand that it needs at least $1 to $2 million. Now, it's a lot of money. You're being put in charge of that. You're helping to manage it along with the researcher. So you're going to have quite a few responsibilities. You will help determine many times at what level somebody comes in at. When you're buying equipment, you are the one that has to find the most price-effective piece of equipment. You have to make sure there's adequate funds there to pay participants, because remember, we like to offer people something for coming and participating in the study. So you're very much in a supervisory position. And since you're managing money, you're going to have quite a few responsibilities. You'll also be supervising and training research assistants. The nice thing about being a research coordinator, you yourself at one time, more than likely, was a research assistant. You know the questions, you know the issues, you know the problems. And so when you take people on board, you help them out. You help to train them. So if you're good with working with people, if you are a good teacher, if you are able to be patient, if you are able to build a team, that's what is needed to be a research coordinator. I remember I worked with someone in the city. She was a research coordinator. I think she was one of the best I've ever seen. She was working with a staff of about 10 people, and something that always impressed me about her, she was knowledgeable about what was going on, and she was not bashful to help out. She got in there. If somebody didn't come to work one day, she jumped right in and did what was needed to be done. And I think the staff liked her, I liked her, and it was a very effective situation. And certainly she was there for a number of years, and I wouldn't be surprised if she's still there. Something that may sound a little bit intimidating, but frankly, it's kind of fun, it's challenging, is you're going to help design research. You know, a lot of times things look good on paper. You propose to do a study. You're working with 3 or 4-year-old children. And then you begin to do the project and you realize what you proposed isn't working. The researchers are going to come to you. You're going to be part of the team. They're going to ask you, well, how do you think we should change this? What needs to be done? What does the existing research tell us? What should we do? A lot of people enjoy that. That's a challenge. And certainly you know that your input will make a difference in terms of how the project comes out. Working in close collaboration. I want to emphasize this because more than likely you're not going to be on the fringe. You're going to be in there. There's generally, most labs will have a meeting in place. You generally meet together as a group once every week, maybe twice every week. You're meeting there with the researchers. You're giving them input. They're listening to you. You know, you have to remember, this is a central role. Researchers get money for doing this project. They would like to continue their work. They want their work done properly. They want it done carefully. Because if it's not, they don't get more grant funding to do anything else. And so they want you to help them out. So this is very much a team effort. And they want somebody who's detail-oriented. They don't want somebody bashful. If you don't think something is working, tell them. There's nothing worse than you get done with the project and somebody says to you, I knew that wasn't going to work. It was done terribly. I mean, certainly, all that time, all that energy, and the potential of the research is gone. I want to show you an ad that I found online. I looked through several. It was posted at Stanford University, but they were looking for somebody to work in the lab. I want to read it, and then I want to go through it point by point because I think it's a very nice ad. I'm sure they'll get people to work in their lab, but it illustrates a lot of what researchers are looking for when they take on people to work as part of a project. And before I even do so, are there any questions anyone has at this point? I don't mind. Go ahead.
You've identified a number of different positions, and I'm wondering which ones are really more accessible and available on a current kind of basis.
Research assistant. There are a number of research assistant positions open, and that's generally how a lot of people are brought into the research. And I'll tell you, most of the time, people move from being a research assistant to either perhaps a coordinator or recruiter based upon how they worked as a research assistant. So the research assistant is the entry-level position. And frankly, if you do a nice job you're liked and the money keeps coming in to do studies, you'll probably be moved up.
But that's within one location. What if you were a research assistant in one location and then you're interested in moving from that location? What are your chances of becoming a recruiter or a coordinator in a different location?
Very good. Very good. Better in the institution that you're at, but you're going to get a letter of recommendation, most probably, by the people that you're working for. Because frankly, most researchers understand people don't want to be a research assistant forever. And so if you have somebody with you 2 or 3 years, and they tell you, I found a better position, I think most researchers will say, you know what, I'm so happy for you. And you'll probably get a pretty good letter of recommendation. And that letter of recommendation is weighed quite heavily because, you know, the education is important, no doubt. But when you take somebody on as a recruiter or a coordinator, you want to see that they were able to function well as a research assistant. Because if those skills are in place, you know they're going to transfer. So, research assistant is the place you begin. Any other questions? Here's the job description. Now remember, this is posted from an infant lab at Stanford. Nicely put together, some interesting qualifications are presented here. Job description. Research assistant at the Center for Infant Studies in the Department of Psychology, where we do experimental research in early language development. As an RA, you will help us with participant recruitment, running experiments with infants and children, and data coding and analysis. This is a terrific lab community with lots of student participation. I think it's a great job description, and I know the person who runs the lab, and I'm sure she runs a great lab. Here are the qualifications. No previous research experience is necessary. What's essential is that you bring to this work a desire to learn, high energy, a positive and professional attitude, and meticulous attention to detail in the many different jobs you'll be asked to perform. Conscientiousness, good organizational and interpersonal skills, and punctuality are essential. You will work independently as well as part of a research team. Basic computer skills are required, such as Microsoft Office. I want to go through each of these points one by one, because I can tell you when we look for people who are for research assistants, we look for a lot of these qualifications, whether they're written down or not. We ask people about them. So let's begin. Let's look at the list here. And the issues I want to cross are the characteristics that you should have, but also let's take a look at another issue. What's the benefit for you? What are you going to get out of being a research assistant? A desire to learn. You notice that in the ad. A desire to learn, I think, means don't be afraid to do things that you're not comfortable with in terms of tasks or things that you may even think you don't have enough experience with. Most of the time, researchers know that you're going to be asked to maybe work with a computer, to do an assessment that you haven't done before. That's okay. They're willing to train you. As long as you say, I'll do it, I'll try it out, as long as you help me, that's all that's needed. That desire to learn is extremely important. What you don't want to be is to say to the researcher, I can't do it, I won't do it. I mean, frankly, because we'll probably look at you and say, no, we think you can do it. And that's why you were hired. You have those skills. You can do it. High energy. I found it interesting that she put that in there, but frankly, we do look for that. You're dealing with children. You know, when a child comes to the lab, it doesn't look like Frankenstein's laboratory most of the time. In fact, most labs look pretty much like a classroom, and we try to decorate them in a child-friendly way. But you know, when you bring a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old to an unfamiliar place, they're not going to be comfortable being there. And so what your job is to make them feel comfortable. If you're lethargic, if you're not, certainly if you don't have any energy, that's going to rub off to the child. The child's going to feel that, and they'll become more worried. So high energy is important when you're working with kids. A positive and professional attitude. Extremely important. I think a positive attitude means a willingness to do things, a good attitude, but a professional one too, to make sure that you know your boundaries between the children and you, the parents and you, and that you act in a way that's nice, that's cordial, but certainly recognizing that you're not a relative of the family or a friend of the child. You're there to take the child through the research. A meticulous attention to detail. Oh, I'll tell you, researchers are sticklers for this one. When they administer an assessment, they want it done in a uniform way. If you've ever taken a psychology class, you know we emphasize that when research is done, you do it the same for everybody. Each person that works on the study gives the questionnaire in the same manner, the assessment in the same manner. You're trained to do that because we don't want anyone to say or to look at our results, or we find that research assistant A versus research assistant B did things differently, and the data is reflected by the way they did it differently. So you'll be trained to do things very carefully. A willingness to perform different jobs. Do you mind doing clerical work? Do you mind perhaps working with children? Do you mind even at times trying to help mom find a parking space? All different types of things you have to do to carry out research. Most people will say they like doing the different jobs because it makes the day go very quickly. But a willingness to do different jobs. Good organizational skills. You know, the one thing, when you take kids through research, you write everything down, you keep the data very orderly, because when the data is done and all collected, researchers want to look at it. And organization is important. The worst thing that can happen is you're dealing with a child, or perhaps somebody else has tested the child, and you ask the research assistant, so what did you think about, Joey that came in? Do you think he was having, a problem with X, Y, or Z? And the person says to you, well, I never wrote it down, I forgot. I mean, once the information is lost, it's lost. Interpersonal skills. Are you able to work as part of the team? Can you hold a conversation with other people? Are you cordial? Are you pleasant? Do you have a positive attitude? Punctuality. Do you come on time? This is extremely important. When you make an appointment to see a child at 9 o'clock, you have to be there at 9 o'clock. You're going to be expected to be there. We're waiting for you. And if you come at 9:30, 10 o'clock, the parent is there, that's bad. We need you to be on time. I thought this was an interesting point also. Can you work independently and as part of a team? I've had the occasion to work with a couple people who really couldn't work independently, because once they worked independently, they became distracted. And many times in the lab, you'll be required to do things on your own or to work together with others. So those qualities are going to be examined. The other thing, basic computer skills. Can you use Microsoft Office? But let me say something. Maybe that's the only computer skill you have. Maybe you don't even like computers. Maybe you're a little intimidated by them. Don't be afraid, because most of the time researchers are going to be eager to train you. They're not going to give you things that they don't think you can handle. And you may be working with statistical software, maybe working with Excel, maybe spreadsheets. Don't worry, they will train you. They'll help you out. So don't let this be a deterrent. I mean, frankly, I've seen a couple people who I think declined jobs because they were afraid of this. Don't have that be a fear of yours. Jump into it, you'll get trained, I'm sure you'll do fine. The other qualification, flexibility. Working with kids demands flexibility. 2 reasons. First of all, you make an appointment to see a child, you tell the mom, and the mom agrees that 11 o'clock is a good time for her. When does she come? 12:30. Now you may be involved in something else. You may even have another child there. You may have to get somebody else's help. You have to remain flexible. You have to understand parents can't always be there on time. Buses run late, trains run late, or the younger or the older child has an issue. The nice thing is, though, that mom or dad still came. So you have to be a bit flexible.
So this is one time you don't pay attention to that meticulous detail.
Correct. So you have to know when to let it go. And frankly, I'm a creature of habit. And I can tell you, if I'm working on a study and a mother comes 3 hours late, and I have another appointment there, I can tell you I sweat bullets because I wonder, how am I going to get the other child through? And kids only have a limited attention span, but you have to be flexible. Let's do the flip side now. What's not conducive to being a research assistant? Hesitancy to learn new skills. Don't be afraid, learn them, okay? I remember I worked with somebody a number of years ago. She didn't want to do one of the assessments. She didn't think she could do it. I said, just learn. We went back and forth about this. And frankly, she learned, and she was probably one of the best testers of that assessment I've ever seen. So don't be fearful. You'll be taught, you'll learn. I'll tell you something that will not go over well and probably won't keep you in the job long: persistent lateness. There's nothing worse than if you have children scheduled at 9 o'clock, you're working with 3-year-olds, you know you have an hour and a half of good time because they need their nap, and your assistant doesn't come till an hour later. That can really be a problem, because most of the time you're going to be depending heavily on your research assistant. You need them there. So you can't be late. If you say you're going to be there at 9, you're there at 9. This is important, I think, for the interview, and it's important as you carry out the job. And that is how you dress. Okay? I can tell you that when a person walks through the door to be a research assistant, we're not looking for the person to be dressed in Armani. I can tell you, though, people want individuals to dress in a business casual way. A nice pair of jeans, a nice modest shirt. Okay? And frankly, that's how most people want to see you come when you run kids. We don't expect you to wear fancy clothing because you're going to be on the floor with the kids. You're chasing them all around. But as long as you dress in a very modest way, yet a very casual way. One thing that I see today, constant cell phone use. This doesn't go over well. I can tell you it makes researchers' hair stand on end if you're in the lab with a child and the research assistant is on the phone. You're missing behavior. You're not making adequate observations. It can even be a distraction. That's not going to go over well. That could get you fired. Lack of motivation. If you come through the door day after day and you look as if you'd rather be anywhere than there, once again, it's not going to go over well. Sloppiness. Sloppiness, particularly in terms of how you collect data or when you're helping to analyze the data. I can tell you researchers want to know where every little number went. They don't want estimations, they want accuracy, because they want to be sure if the study came out or didn't come out that the data was collected appropriately. The last one. Inability to follow directions. If people tell you to do something a certain way, do it a certain way. I remember years ago I worked with someone, and we told her each and every time a child makes a response, write it down. She said, well, why? We said, because you know, as you go through the items and things happen, you'll forget. She refused to do it that way. In fact, she would complete a whole page full of items and at the end, write it all down. That's a nightmare. Because you know, and I know, more than likely you're going to forget things. And she did not follow directions, not only on that test, but on others. That's another bad thing. What are the benefits? I mean, certainly I've told you all of the qualifications, what you shouldn't do. But to be a research assistant, hopefully there's something in it for you, and there is. I think first and foremost, you get to work with children. And frankly, it's a perk. It's fun to work with them. It's great to get to know families. It's great to work with parents. Most want to be there. Most want to help you. Most really become almost like a friend to you because you see them so many times. So that's one of the biggest perks. But we all need a little money to live. That's another benefit. It's entry level. Most labs will pay you anywhere between about $12 to $15. It's not going to make you a multimillionaire, but it's a place to start. You'll also, in many places, get health coverage. A lot of people find this a perk. The health coverage may not be extensive, it may be basic health, but I can tell you a lot of people will say that's just fine. They are extremely happy to have it. It'll give you work experience. I think the work experience you get is pretty nice. You get a very wide array of tasks that you're given. Most of the time, you master them, and you can really make, you have a lot of things to put on your resume. So the work experience you get is very nice. And let me mention too, you're also going to get letters of recommendation. When you have a person that helped you out, that was really good at what he or she did, most of the time you'll get a pretty nice recommendation. I mean, I've worked with people 8, 9 years ago now, and they still contact me for letters of recommendation. I'm happy to give them. And they've gone on to very nice things. You'll increase your skills. If you're not good working on a computer, you're going to be better at working on a computer. If you want experience working with children, you'll get it. So your knowledge of software will increase. The other thing that will increase is your knowledge of administering standardized assessments and certainly questionnaires. The other thing that may scare you, but you will get it and it'll serve you well, you'll increase your knowledge in terms of data coding and data collection. I think a lot of people when they initially start, they say, I don't want to do that. I don't know if I could do that. You will do it. You'll do fine because most of the time it's arranged in a step-by-step manner. And you'll network. If you don't know many people that can help you out with recommendations, you will begin to learn people that certainly can give you recommendations. You know, certainly through the years, I've worked with children. I myself am not a clinical psychologist. I don't do therapy. I do know people, though, that do clinical psychology. And people that have worked with me have asked if I would introduce them to this clinical psychologist. I have. I'm more than happy to. I mean, certainly you want to help people out. You want to give them a leg up on things here. So most of the time, if somebody knows someone, they'll try to help you out. And certainly if you've done a good job, you're a very effective person in the lab, they're happy to give you a recommendation. So where are you going to find these jobs? There are a number of sites on the web. And frankly, I was surprised by how many jobs were listed. A great place was idealist.org. You can put in the keywords research assistant, and if you want to add the word children to kind of narrow in on the type of research you want to become involved in, that's what you do. I started going through and reading some of the ads. Let me tell you, there's a lot of research being done in this tri-state area. There's a lot being done on Long Island. And look through the various ads if this is maybe something that interests you. Maybe you would consider being a research assistant in a project that fits your interest. So maybe you do want to be a teacher. Maybe there's a research project, and I'm sure there are, dealing with academic achievement or factors that impact academic achievement. It's a great place to learn. It's a great place to hook up. More than likely, you'll also be working with teachers because a lot of times you get a lot of people involved on these projects. Another site you can look at is Indeed.com. Once again, there are a lot of research jobs available. Maybe you don't want to work with children. Maybe you want to try something else. Maybe you want to work with a clinical population. Maybe you want to even work on animal studies. Or maybe you want to get out of psychology. There's a lot of different research programs out there. Try it. You'll like it. Another great place, the New York Times Classifieds. Look for research assistant, look for children. There are usually in the Sunday Times, there are generally a number of positions available. You might also consider going to some of your professors if you've taken a psychology class. A lot of times they may be involved in or they know of research. And certainly if you know somebody, they seem to be someone who is a responsible student and they're asking to work in a lab, more than likely you'll be willing to have them come on board. You might also consider a large hospital or university. LIJ, North Shore, as I said, Albert Einstein in the Bronx, Columbia, all have large research areas. What I like about large hospitals or universities are this. Large hospitals in particular don't have a large undergraduate population. If you try to get a job at NYU, for instance, a lot of times their students are the first ones that get those positions. A large hospital, though, doesn't have access to all of those students. And so most of the time they're advertising in the community at large, in the region at large. Provides a great opportunity. And certainly you'll be working with a whole different host of people, and you'll have quite a few opportunities available. You might even do a Google search. I've done a Google search to see what was there for research assistant. A lot of things pop up. And that's my talk so far. But if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Let me ask a question. How many people here want to be teachers? How many people ever considered being a research assistant? A couple people. If you're interested, if you need a job, I would tell you to consider it. It may not be exactly what you want to do at first, but I can tell you it's a great stepping stone. Get yourself involved in a project that you may see some relevance to your career in the future. I mean, certainly through the years I have worked with one person who later became a high school teacher. And she did enjoy working with the young kids and gave her a different perspective. So don't discount it right away. Consider it. Toss it around. You may even consider, too, maybe you'll move up. Maybe you'd like to be a professor after you work with researchers. So it's a great place to get some experience.
What about a school psychologist? I think this
Yep.
would be a wonderful foundation for that. Does it help at all if you join the psychology club or become a member of a club? Let's say you're in undergrad school and you're interested in becoming a research assistant. Do you think that would be beneficial?
I think it'd be beneficial, certainly, to join the club, the Honor Society, because not only are going to be mailings from the organization, but you will be finding out about research opportunities. I can tell you that 2 years ago I found out of 2 jobs. And for the students here at Queensborough, I advertised it. Unfortunately, I was only able to fill 1 job. But it was a decent paying job. The student was happy to get it. She started off at $12 an hour, and the hours were flexible. So certainly it does help to become a member of the society. I mean, certainly you'll get to know me a little bit better, and any jobs that I hear of, I like to pass them along. So, any other questions?
Do most people stay with the same researcher ongoing, or do they have to move from one researcher to the next?
That's a great question. You know what it hinges on a lot of times are 2 things. How well you do, and do they have money to pay you? I can tell you that generally if you get somebody that's good, you probably won't keep them as a research assistant forever. You're going to start moving them up in the organization. You'll be moved up from research assistant to recruiter to research coordinator, and certainly there will be different levels that you will go through. It hinges a lot of times on funding. I think one of the downsides of doing research long-term is that funding, either through NIH or NSF, it kind of goes through spurts and then it kind of slows down. Unfortunately, at this point in time, things aren't so good. The economy hasn't been that good. Funding is extremely tight. So people are running very, very small units. They try to keep the number of people they employ to a minimum so that at least they can keep them on board. Frankly, what people are talking about these days, they're hoping the funding will begin to increase again. Because even the projects they're funding are at a very, very low percentage. It's usually, when people put in projects in the country, usually about 8 to 10% get funded. It's down now to 5 to 6%, which is very low. But if you get into a place, here's the good thing, if there are multiple researchers, one person may not be able to support you any longer, but another person will take you on. So the larger place that you get involved with, the higher likelihood it is that you'll be able to maintain your employment. So, the other thing too, even if a researcher doesn't get funded, but if that person does good work, they don't want their lab to fall apart. So a lot of times the research institution will give them some emergency funding. They'll say, well, keep your lab going for a year or two, hopefully you'll get some funding. And I point that out because that'll be good for you if you are working in a lab. You can be assured that, you know, things are pretty bad, pretty tight right now, but they're going to help you out. They're going to keep you in employment. So, the other thing too, don't forget, a lot of times the research community is a small community. Your name will get known if you're good. And so, say for instance one place can't support you any longer, you apply for a job at somebody else's lab, people know people, and guess what? You're hired in another place. So I've seen a lot of people travel around different places, and frankly, I'm kind of shocked. I was like, my God, I didn't know you were working there. And there they are. So it's that network. And you know, too, when you get your letter of recommendation, the person's going to sign it, obviously. You recognize the name. So. Any other questions?
Does it seem like something you'd be interested in following up on, or are you afraid? Are you uncertain? Look at the smiles on your face. What do you think? Is that something you'd go for?
You should try it, even if you want to volunteer at first, because we do take volunteers on. Try it out for a month, see if you like it.
They don't volunteer anymore, they want money.
Well, then even try it as a research assistant.
I'm just kidding.
You know, most people are surprised at the experience they get. Because I can tell you the places I've worked, we love to put people to work. And if they show a little talent, we let them go.
Let me ask you, because you said something very important, because they have to complete 30 hours of volunteer work in the Intro to Education course, the ET-410. Is it possible for them to work with the children in a volunteer capacity? Are there clearances that they have to go through? What kind of background check?
Well, that's a good question. That depends on the lab. Some labs, some institutions will require that you go through a background check. I can tell you that labs today are less likely to take on volunteers for a short-term basis because they have to go through that city course to work with human subjects. And there's a lot more prep work than there used to be. So generally, a lot of times the researchers will ask, can we take you on, or for at least a year? Because if you're going to do all that prep work and all that training, they want to make sure that you'll be on board to help out with the project. You know, there's quite an investment of time too. Because when you get somebody involved in a large-scale project, and you're seeing maybe 150 children, you're seeing them across maybe 3 years, and maybe when the children come in, maybe you spend 3, 4, 5 hours with them. There's a number of tasks that you administer and that you train people on. Well, you don't want all that experience to leave right away. So I think the good thing is it'll give you a little bit of job security for a little bit of time. So.
For the volunteer assistant program that you're just talking about, so for example, if I'm willing to volunteer in that program, I have to go through all that training first that you just talk about?
Yeah, most places will make you go through the training. Because
While volunteering in school?
Yes, yeah. Volunteering in the research lab. This is something that's mandated by a lot of institutions and follows the guidelines of the federal government. Today we have a lot of rules and regulations that are in place when you're dealing with research concerning human subjects. Children are considered a vulnerable population, so they want to make sure that you know how to conduct the research appropriately, and so you have to go through a training course. And it's uniform through the country, takes about 4 to 6 hours.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
And
But it's divided once a week. The training course is once a week until you complete it.
it's an online course.
Oh, it's an outline.
You can do it in one fell swoop, so you can do it one day, sit there at the computer for 6 hours, or you can do it over the course of a week.
Okay, so those training are free, right?
The school will pay for it. If they say that they're going to take you on as a volunteer, you take the course at their charge. Some places too might run a background check on you. That depends. But there's going to be an investment of time here.
And that's good for how many years? I've forgotten.
Used to be 5, now it's 3.
3. Yeah, so once you're trained, it's good for 3 years.
I mean, it's like you're saying networking, but let's say I want to be a teacher for second graders,
Mhm.
and if I'm going to be working in a lab or as a research assistant with little kids, you know, like I made my connection in the school,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, do you think it's a high possibility I might get hired in that school?
If you have,
Just because they know me?
so if you have connections in the school, will working in a lab help you out in any way to get a job in the school? Well, I think that'd be a great question for Professor Spradley.
No, I think
Ms.
if you're
Ron.
going to, if you're interested in working in a school, I think, and you're going to do some volunteer work, it's probably to your advantage to be connected with the school that you want to go to, so that people in that environment can see what you're capable of doing, how you interact with the staff and the students and so on. But don't discount what he's describing, because that can also work to your advantage. So it doesn't mean that you have to sort of let that opportunity go to pick up this one. So the volunteer, this one that he's describing is volunteer as well, but you have to do the CITI. In the schools, you don't.
I think what would be very interesting, though, if you want to pursue teaching, is to even see what we do in the lab with children, how we assess them, how we figure out their abilities, what we're looking at these days in terms of what we're trying to understand more, because I think it'll enrich your knowledge and give you a different perspective. So I don't think in any way it can hurt you.
Right.
I think it can only help you.
Oh, definitely.
So,
I mean, you can take some strategies from working with them in the lab and apply it to your classroom.
absolutely.
Yeah.
What kind of research specifically allows you to get that knowledge from a child, or is all research with children started that way?
I think that's a great question. I think probably you want to focus on research that either concerns social development or cognitive development. Or maybe the primary interest is not maybe even on cognitive or social development. Maybe, for instance, you know, there's a project going on, I know, in the city these days, and they're looking at the effect of toxins on development, environmental toxins. But when you read a little further, they will tell you they're concerned with how it influences cognitive development. I think that would be a benefit, because when you're looking at cognition, you're going to be interested in things, you know, how children are thinking, how are they planning, how are they reading, how are they spelling, what's their math like, and more than likely you're going to be doing a lot of standardized assessments, and I think that will facilitate your knowledge. So that's what I would look for. Generally, you're going to see that in the ad 2 for the position. They'll give you a 1 or 2 sentence description of the research they're doing. They'll tell you. So they don't want you to come in exactly blind to the research. They want you to be aware a bit of what you're going to be doing. Well, thank you very much.